Today's story is called Paul's Discovery. Now, there was something about this story that, I heard it years ago, but it always confused me because it starts out where Paul's name is actually Saul. Saul was a Jewish name that he was born with. He was raised studying the Jewish ways, a book that's referenced as the Torah. He was not raised with the belief that Jesus was the Messiah or the Holy Spirit. So as he grew and studied, he followed the Torah. He was a great supporter of it. And as he got older, maybe closer to 30, it might have been after Jesus had been crucified, and he continued to be on a mission to stop people from supporting the beliefs of Jesus Christ. So he probably was about 30 to 35 when our story begins. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, in the beginning, a baby was born. His mother and father named him Saul, after the first king of Israel. His home was in a city called Taurus, near the sea. As the boy grew, he helped his father in their shop. Saul's father made tents. Even though Saul's family lived far from Rome, and they were Jewish, they were considered Roman citizens, like many others in the city. Perhaps that had something to do with why they were making tents for the Roman army. Now, Saul heard many languages in the streets of Taurus, but it was the language of the synagogue that he loved most. His father had read the Torah with him together for his whole life. Saul was very serious about knowing the Hebrew Bible. Saul grew, and when it was time, he decided to go to the great city of Jerusalem, so he could have the best of all the teachers. He waved goodbye to his family and to his home of Taurus, and he traveled to the holy city. Now, when Saul entered the city through the great high gate, he went first to the temple. He worshipped there. That is probably also where he studied and worked. His teacher was Gamaliel, or possibly another rabbi in that family. Saul wanted to be one of the Pharisees. He worked hard to keep all of the laws in the Torah. Now, Saul did work hard to keep the laws, but he had no time or patience for people who didn't. One day he heard about followers of the way. Followers of the way. What he meant was these were followers of Jesus Christ and his teachings. They thought that the Messiah had come, but Saul did not believe this. It was Jesus of Nazareth that they talked about. Now, when Saul heard about this, he got very angry. The Messiah was supposed to drive away the Roman soldiers and rule with justice and mercy. Jesus was a criminal who was crucified. Besides, in the law, it says that God curses any criminal who is hanged upon a tree. Now, these people were telling lies about God. He had to stop them from saying such things. Now, there was a follower of the way. His name was Stephen. He was one of the most important of those followers of Jesus Christ. He was tried by the court in the temple, and he was taken to the city to be stoned to death. Now Saul, he held the coats of the ones who threw the stones, until Stephen was dead. Then Saul was given a letter by the high priest to go to Damascus to catch more of the followers of Jesus Christ, more of the followers of the way, and bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. Now, Saul traveled to Damascus, and on one afternoon he climbed up a road towards the city. And suddenly there was a great light. It was so bright that he fell to the ground, and he was blinded. He couldn't see anything. And in the darkness a voice came to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you trying to hurt me? Why are you persecuting me?" All Saul could say was, "Who are you? Who are you, Lord?" The voice answered, "I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Get up, go into the city. You will be told what to do." Now, Saul tried to get up, but he couldn't see anything. He couldn't see the path. He was blind. So Saul was led into the city, and was left at a house on a straight street. For 3 days he went without food, without water, and then in the chaos and the darkness of his blindness he heard another voice. "Hello, brother Saul. I am Ananias. I was sent by Jesus to lay hands on you and bless you." When he touched Saul with his hands, something like the scales of a fish fell away from his eyes, and he could see. And then Ananias baptized him. Saul was changed forever. He could feel the power of the Holy Spirit growing inside him. Then Ananias and Saul had a meal together. Now slowly Saul regained strength. When he was better, he went to the synagogue to tell his fellow Jews the good news about what had happened to him. When they heard what Saul said, they tried to kill him. They even put guards at the city gate to catch him if he tried to get away. But the followers of the way hid Saul in the city, and they couldn't find him. Okay, now one night when it was really dark, Saul and a small group of followers of the way climbed quietly up to the top of the city wall. They carried a very large basket and lots of rope. They tied the rope to the basket, and Saul climbed inside. They lowered him down the wall, and then he disappeared into the dark. Now Saul went into the desert of Arabia. He was confused, and he needed to understand what God wanted him to do. He had come to Damascus to catch the followers of the way, but now he was one of the followers. What did this all mean? Saul prayed and prayed. He watched the empty desert and listened to its silence. He came so close to God, and God came so close to him, that he knew exactly what God wanted him to do. He was to travel to the ends of the earth and tell people what had happened to him, for he had truly changed. He experienced the Holy Spirit, and he believed. His work was to try to say how hate had turned into love, and to begin churches wherever people could show how this was done. He also was to write the letters to help new churches do just this. Now, Saul began his work, and he sailed across the sea. He walked across the land. He went back to Jerusalem to meet with Peter, James, and others they now called Christians. The Christians were suspicious of Saul. They didn't trust him yet, but they finally said to keep telling your story to the Gentiles. These were the non-Jewish. Saul even changed his name. He was traveling so much in the Roman Empire that he began to use his Roman name, which is Paul. Now, Paul's work was to start churches, but he also wrote lots of letters to young churches to help them with all of their problems. He wrote to the Philippians and the Ephesians. He wrote to the Thessalonians, the best I can do, kids, and the Corinthians. He even wrote to the Romans and told them he wanted to visit them and then go on to Spain. Now, Paul turned towards Jerusalem. Oh my goodness. Can we fix this? Paul turned toward Jerusalem for the last time. As soon as he came into the city, he went to the temple. He wanted to make a sacrifice. He was still a Nazirite, keeping strict Jewish law, as well as being a Christian. The people shouted that he didn't belong there. Some people began to push him. The Roman soldiers came running. They pushed the people back with their shields, short swords, and spears. They saved Paul's life, and they marched him to the fortress Antonia. Now, the Roman soldiers decided to beat him to find out why the Jews wanted to kill him. But that was when Paul told them he was a Roman citizen, and Roman citizens were always taken to the Roman courts to be tried. So he was taken to Caesarea on the coast. And after about 2 years, he was put on a ship that was sailing to Rome to be judged in the law courts there. So Paul sailed to Rome. During this trip, his ship sank, but he survived and was saved and went on anyway. So after that time, Paul was kept as a prisoner in his own home. A soldier guarded him, but he could go to visit friends while he was waiting for the Roman court to decide what he had done wrong. Some say that Paul went on to Spain and then came back to Rome. Others think that he was executed after the great fire which burned Rome in the year 67. I like to think of Paul as still traveling on to the ends of the earth. Now, Paul's work was to tell his story and to write letters. He became a story himself, and his letters are still read in churches today. Now, I just wonder what part of this story you think is the most important. There's so much that he did in his life and he experienced. I wonder if there's anything that we could leave out that we don't need. But I really wonder how you might find the Holy Spirit in your life.